this is Paul McGann, and you're listening to the Fiveish Fangirls podcast.
The Tangents we continue all the way to episode 469 of the Fiveish Fangirls podcast. I now declare this podcast open. Welcome everyone to this week's episode of the Fiveish Fangirls podcast. So glad you could join us. Let's start off like we work with the virtual table and see who's joined us this week.
This is Holly from Wisconsin, and no, I did not forget and jump ahead of anybody this time.
No, she did not. This is Rachel in Indianapolis, Indiana. Yeah, no, it is just the two of us.
Yes.
This week, so.
Oh, nice segue, and I saw what you did there.
Yeah.
and Rachel, I must say for our listeners who, if they haven't paid attention, I love the title of the podcast episode.
There's just so many opportunities, there's just so many options, but it just that particular phrase just comes up so often that it's just like, I was like, why not?
Yes.
No, but we'll get to that. First up, not really news, mostly just housekeeping. So, I think after everything from like San Diego and D23 that everyone's kind of petered out as far as news. Like, we gave you everything we had. Move on. Now we're just waiting for stuff to start airing. Like Only Murders in the Building and stuff like that. So, but that being said, while we wait, for our gold standard listeners and fam, we've got a new episode in the main feed, where I was not there, but Nick and Zan and a new guest that unfortunately, because I was not there, I've yet to meet, talk about we actually talked about this, and I hinted that this may be coming up on Gold Standard when we talked about Queen, the works, the movie Metropolis, which was an inspiration for the music video for Radio Gaga. So, but yeah, I was a little disheartened that I missed out on that particular episode, but we had to work with the guest schedule, so we did not record on our usual evening, and that was the night that Chauncey and I went to see The Sandlot with
gotcha.
some of the cast. So, I think I'm okay with missing it. Yeah. I got to meet another white guy named Chauncey. So yeah, that's in the main feeds. And then for Patreon supporters, this month's Patreon pick by Shalane, is now available, and we talk about Jumanji, the OG 95 film with Robin Williams. Which was interesting because both Nick and I have seen it countless times since childhood. Zan had never seen it, and then Greg Verb from Star Trek, the Undiscovered podcast, among other things, he'd never seen it. To have two people have never seen this movie, and two people that have seen it a lot, made for an interesting discussion. And I'll tell you, watching it as a 40-something-year-old is a lot different than when you're 12.
It hits different. It hits different.
It is way different. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just different. So yeah, that's on Patreon. If you want to become a Patreon supporter, you'll unlock that along with our entire back catalog of Patreon picks, which are all over the place. So, and a reminder, as of this recording, this weekend, and I'll remind y'all at the end as well, but this weekend, the weekend of August 23rd through 25th, is PopCon Louisville. So I will be there along with a lot of recognizable faces. Brandon Peters from the Brandon Peters Show will be there hosting the live podcast stage again. I know he's posted the schedule for that, so you can go check his social medias and see who is bringing their talents to the Louisville podcast stage. KJ will be there doing her thing as well. I'm sure moderating a lot of the celebrity panels, as she does. So you can check out her social medias for posting. Of course, all the PopCon crew, Carl. I will be helping out as best I can with Writers Row, which if you remember from my postings from Indie PopCon, Rob Southgate and his Southgate Media Group and Four Horsemen Publications had a decent-sized booth called Writers Row, where a number of their independent authors, because they're an independent publishing company, so a number of their independent authors were there hawking their goods, doing some panels, talking about writing, talking about fandom, all sorts of fun things that should be happening again. I do not know the schedule for that, though, as far as like panels are concerned. But Rob asked if I could lend a hand, and I said sure. So what exactly I'm going to be doing, I do not know. But if you need me, more than likely I will be somewhere either near the Writers Row booth or in the panel room. So, but I will post as I know more.
Sounds good.
Yep. I just have to make it to Friday. So there is that. All right. So, moving on to feedback. So we got feedback from Shalane. Actually, she sent a couple pieces of feedback. Let's get to her first part. Whoops. As my windows are like there. So of course, talking about Disney D23, Shalane's all over that. So, she says D23 was amazing this year. I stayed up late, glued to social media and YouTube, eagerly await announcements, upcoming movie shows and park updates. Especially the Disney Legend Award, though eventually I had to sleep. I didn't want to miss anything. I understand the sentiment that, though. Well, for me, it's a 3-hour time difference. At least for you, it's like an hour time difference, but still. It makes for a long weekend for those of us in different time zones, and I'm sure an even longer weekend for the people there, although I'm pretty sure Lou and Becky do not sleep. I'm thrilled about Moana 2 and the introduction of Moana's little sister, the second Disney princess with a sister after Elsa. Yeah. I'm curious if I don't know how to pronounce her name. Aluli Cavallo is wearing a wig given her recent haircut for the Mean Girls movie. So, could be. Or maybe she got extensions. Who knows? They could do all sorts of things with hair in Hollywood. So, let's see. There were so many exciting announcements at D23. I know instead of having the studio chairman, Pete Docter, Kevin Feige, and Jennifer Lee were making the announcements. Yeah, I think it's easier if they break it up by the individual IP heads. I think. Zootopia 2 is going to be fantastic, especially with Ki Hoi Kwan joining the cast. I'm excited to see new animals like walruses, whales, and reptiles. I wonder if there would be a third or fourth Zootopia film featuring birds and fish. Could be. Give them a way to keep the new Zootopia movie show thing at Animal Kingdom updated. Toy Story 5 is in good hands with Andrew Stanton. I'm eager to see how it follows up on Toy Story 4, especially with Woody back with the gang. I'm also thrilled that The Incredibles 3, which I think will be even better than an Edna Mode movie. I think Edna Mode needs like her own like mini series, kind of like the I Am Groot.
Yes.
But with Edna Mode.
What not to wear.
Yes. It should just be like shorts with Edna Mode, like absolutely destroying superheroes' choices for their superhero outfit, and then giving it the Edna touch instead. And of course, no capes.
Yeah, no capes.
Disney, you can have that one for free.
Yes.
Please and thank you.
Mm-hmm.
It's great to see Jamie Lee Curtis and Lindsay Lohan back together, especially since Lindsay has made such a positive comeback. I grew up watching her in Disney movies like The Parent Trap, Confessions of a Teenage Drama Queen, and Herbie Fully Loaded. My old high school is even doing a musical version of Freaky Friday this fall. Well, that's cool. I didn't know there was a musical version of Freaky Friday. And yes, it is nice to see Lindsay making a comeback in a positive way. So I know I still have not watched the Disney Legend ceremony, but I read somewhere that apparently Miley Cyrus is all like, yeah, that like rebellion part I had there. Sorry about that.
Mm-hmm.
I set kind of a bad example for the fans.
I had good intentions of watching it live when I shared it in our group message chat, but
yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing to see Jamie Lee Curtis coming out of retirement, winning an Oscar, becoming a Disney legend, and doing a Freaky Friday sequel. I can't wait for your episode of Freaky Friday. Please include the Jodie Foster version. Well, I mean, talk about Freaky Friday, we got to talk about all of them.
We got to do the OG. Come on.
Yes. Just like The Parent Trap. Yeah.
Yes.
I enjoyed the Disney Broadway medley, but wish they included songs from The Little Mermaid, Newsies, Mary Poppins, and Tarzan. I was surprised and excited to see The Greatest Showman coming to Broadway. Fun fact, the original Broadway Tarzan, who performed at D23, worked with me in 2022, and he's friends with Jodie Benson and Ashley Eckstein. Well, that's cool. It's like 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, except it's 6 degrees of Shalane. Yes. And the theater company she's worked at. I think Rachel Ziegler will be a fantastic Snow White. She looked amazing, did a great job in West Side Story. Gal Gadot also looks like an incredible evil queen. Yes, Gal Gadot looks amazing. Yeah, we missed like a whole bunch of Disneyland park news. So she touches upon a few things that we did not talk about, like they're expanding Avengers Campus, among other things. But yes, Pandora, the land of Avatar, is coming to Disneyland. So she's excited about Pandora coming to Disneyland. It's what made me fall in love with Avatar in the first place. I also love Disney rides more than the movies. Villains Land at Disney World sounds amazing. Can't wait to Disney Bound as Maleficent, my favorite Disney villain. Sweet. I have a hat. I may have to send you, Shalane, because I'm not getting much use out of it. But if you want to do a Maleficent Disney Bound, I have a hat that I may have to send you at some point. Someone remind me when I have a moment to think and go to the post office. I was thrilled to hear about Indiana Jones Land coming to Animal Kingdom. My friend, who's a big Indiana Jones fan, is also excited, and we're wondering if there will be snakes. Yes, there will be snakes. Lots and lots of snakes. I love the Frozen stage production. I'm excited for the movie version coming to Disney Plus. I wish they would do the same for The Lion King. You would think they would at this point, considering The Lion King is like the OG Disney Broadway show. Like, The Lion King is the reason that Disney proved that they could move stuff to a live stage musical and actually make it work. Yeah, give some love to The Lion King. Oh, excuse me. I haven't seen the Lion King musical in person yet either. I've seen Beauty and the Beast, but not the Lion King. I noticed you didn't mention the Mufasa trailer. It looked amazing. I was happy to see Lin-Manuel Miranda at D23. This movie was perfect for honoring 30 years of The Lion King. I hope its song gets nominated for an Oscar, giving Lin a shot at an EGOT. I didn't watch the live action. I say that very loosely, live action Lion King. And I don't really care to see the Mufasa because I just don't care for the more live action. I was traumatized enough by the animated version of The Lion King. I don't need more. I don't need more drama. Let's see. I told you there would be a Mandalorian movie. Yes, you told us. I knew there was probably going to be one. I just thought that we were going to get another season of The Mandalorian first.
Right.
Are you talking about season 3 or 4 of The Mandalorian? That's what I'm talking about, is whatever season that we have, however many seasons we have. I thought we were getting one more. And that's what we were supposed to get last year.
Mm-hmm.
Or this year. Last year, this year. Sometime in the last, I don't know, however long. We didn't get it when they said we were going to get it. So I think it was supposed to be earlier this year, because I think they said at San Diego last year that I don't know. Time is a wibbly wobbly ball of nothingness. Oh, there are already 3 seasons on Disney Plus. Okay, thank you. This is just like Firefly, but the Mandalorian Grogu could break box office records.
Mm-hmm.
That and Firefly didn't get 3 seasons.
Right. Just a touch bitter about that, but
I'm so excited about the Tron franchise. I think the 3rd movie will be amazing. I really want to go on the ride at Disney World. Me too. All right, Tron, say go! I got emotional when Miley Cyrus gave her speech. It's great that she's being given another chance, especially after the bangers and plastic hearts era. Yeah. Jamie Lee Curtis's speech was wonderful too, and it was fun to see her and James Cameron reunited. I wonder if they'll work together again, maybe on an Avatar film. I mean, if he's going to keep making these Avatar movies, he's going to have to cast more people, so why not? I thought Angela Bassett might do a tribute to Chadwick Boseman, similar to how James Cameron honored John Landau, who passed away recently. I want to say they did do something for Chadwick. I mean, they had that special that aired on TV,
yeah,
and then they showed the Black Panther movie. So, it's been a little bit of time since Chadwick's passing, so I think it would be probably a little weird to bring it up after other people have passed away since then. I love seeing the Disney princess voice actresses honor Mark Henn. He's such an amazing animator. Thought it was Glenn Keane who animated Pocahontas, not Mark. Mark did animate Anna in Frozen and Giselle in Enchanted. I thought it was sweet that Jasmine was inspired by his sister. Sweet. Now I really need to watch the Legend thing. I think Bob Iger is Disney's savior. Some people might argue with that. I'm not necessarily one who will argue with that, but yeah. I watched a documentary on Disney's 100 years. And I believe Walt Disney wanted the company to be as big as it is now, with movies, TV shows, parks, and cruises. Oh, I mean, when Walt talked about Florida, at the time it was the Florida Project, because obviously it was not close to being completed before his passing. But in general, Walt always said that the parks would never be finished. Even though obviously in California they are pressed for space, but they are still adding and making changes, as we're saying. Avengers Campus is getting an expansion. We're getting Pandora. And obviously in Florida, as Walt literally said, they have the blessing of size. But I think in a way he also knew that it wasn't just the parks that would constantly be innovating and changing and growing at the times. I think he was aware that just the company as a whole would have to constantly reinvent itself to stay relevant and stay modern and keep up with the quote unquote competition. Because I know a lot of the Disney crowd on the internets after D23 with all the park announcements, a lot of people were like, well, this is just Disney responding Universal and what they're doing. Which probably a little, because obviously Universal is their biggest competition. At least in the United States, because we have a Universal in Anaheim, in California, and then one in Florida. So yeah, geographically they're definitely competition. Both companies have IPs that are very, very, very popular. Despite everything going on, the Harry Potter franchise is not going anywhere. So they're, making hand over fist with Harry Potter, the Wizarding World, and now with the Mario Land, and now with this whole Universal Monsters, dark universe that they're planning on building. Yeah, I mean, both companies are it's one of those, it's a race that's never really gonna reach a finish line. But it's kind of like a light cycle race where one will pull ahead and then another one will pull ahead, and then one may veer off and it looks like it's cut the other one off, but no, they found a way around it, I think in general, while some people may look at it as both companies just battling with each other to see who can make the most money or whatever, if you want to be cynical and look at it like that. At the end of the day, I think we're all better for it because they're pushing each other to be as innovative and entertaining and thinking outside the box, so that when people do come visit their parks, they walk away going, wow, I gotta tell my friends about this. I can't wait to see what they do next. So I think at the end of the day, we as the fans and the visitors are the real winners, as cliche as that is. COVID-19 caused a lot of hit and miss films from different studios. Now we're seeing a resurgence with better films. Yep. Disney, Pixar, Star Wars, and Marvel didn't need saving. What kept Disney alive were the parks and TV shows. Yes. Again, all the facets, all the parts of the Disney company, when one has been floundering a little, hits a rough spot, usually the others are there to make sure that the entire company doesn't completely go under. It's called diversification, kids. It's not just for your investment portfolio. Think of Disney as a giant investment portfolio, and some years the metaphorical stock of the theme parks may dip a little, but the movies are doing really well. And in some cases, the movies are what saved the company back in the day. And vice versa. Because the animation studio wasn't doing that hot in the 80s. And the parks were doing pretty good because we were getting, we'd had Epcot open in 82, 81, something like that. I'm over 40. Don't listen to me when it comes to dates. And Hollywood Studios and things like that, which were doing pretty good. Especially because at the time the studios was a theme park, but also a working studio. And when the Disney Renaissance happened, as far as animation is concerned, the park saw a little bit of a, because like Euro Disney wasn't doing too hot there for a little bit, so yeah, it's just that's just the nature of the Disney company, really. Is making sure that they've got enough going on that if one leg is dragging a little, that the rest of them can kind of pull up the slack until the other can bounce back.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Growing up, I watched shows on Disney, Cartoon Network, and Nickelodeon, but I eventually stuck with Disney Channel because it's the most important to me. Now I'm a hardcore Disney fan, along with my best friend. I've studied Disney's past and understand why these movies are so famous. I've also heard rumors about problems at Disney, but I don't care. Just ignore them. Well, I mean, issues that they may have had in the past, yeah, you could ignore them as long as they don't repeat them. As long as they learn from those mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
We did an entire episode just about the Eisner era, and even that did not do the Eisner era justice by any means. And we talked about Walt. We talked about the time from up until Walt's death, and that barely scratches the surface. So yeah, any issues or mistakes that they've made in the past, hopefully they've learned from those and don't repeat those same mistakes. Not letting Katzenberg back in the door was definitely a good start. But among others. But at the same time, you gotta if you don't care to dwell or really dive into the past, that's fine. Some people aren't big into history, and they're just content with the here and now, and that's fine. I'm a bit of a history buff though, so I've been to the family museum in San Francisco. I've been to Walt's hometown in Marceline, and been to the museum there and to the property where he grew up, at least part of it. So, and really dove into the history. And yeah, I understand there's some stuff in the past that's not the most pleasant. But it is what it is, and we just kind of have to recognize that those decisions have led us to where the company is now. And if you're happy with what the company's doing now, then great. Then any of those mistakes in the past were worth the speed bump or the slight detour. But I know some people, the fandom can be quite vocal and be like, oh, this, and they've been saying it for years, this isn't what Walt would have wanted. And you could go back decades, pretty much since Walt passed, and like every decade or so, and look at what the company has done, and you will find somebody be like, this isn't what Walt would have wanted. And it's like, Walt wanted continuation is what Walt wanted. Walt wanted us to try things. Walt wanted them to try things, and if they fail, they fail. And if they don't, great. That was just the way Walt was. So, that's my 2 cents. Obviously, I've got a bit of a sentimental attachment. So you're like, don't go after my mouse. Like, don't go after my child, my childhood, and my adulthood. And then she sent a follow-up and says, another thing I forgot to mention when I started watching Once Upon a Time, my sister saying that Disney is going to take over the world since they own Marvel and Star Wars, but she was joking, and Chrissy called me down and don't listen to whatever sister has to say or what anybody has to say. Thank you for talking your sister off a ledge, Chrissy. I'm sorry you're not here to elaborate on that, but maybe she will when next time she's on. Years later, Disney bought Fox, and I don't know how this was going to turn. I didn't know how this was going to turn out here. Heard all the arguments about it, but some people say it's a good idea for Marvel with the X-Men. Some people say it's a bad idea. Also, my friend was excited for this because her family is big into Disney, and she was excited for Anastasia to finally be a Disney princess via adoption. But yes, Anastasia is an adopted Disney princess, and the Xenomorph Queen is a Disney queen. That's also Fox. So my friend has no problem with Disney's doing. Same with me. Well, see, as long as you're happy, that's all that matters. I also love the D23 masquerade, and they had a girl dress as Anastasia. One of these days, I'm going to save my money for D23. You and me both, sister. Me and my friend are planning on going in the future, and we're working on our cosplay, so time to save money. That is a good idea. So awesome sauce. Thank you, Shalane. As always. I knew you would have a lot to say. I saw her emails come in. I'm like, yeah, there she is. That's okay, Shalane. Keep them coming.
Yes.
All right. Moving on to this week's topic. We're going to do something a little different because we are talking about a Beatles album, but there's a twist. Because this particular Beatles album only exists. Well, there's a couple of versions of it, but the reason it exists is for an interesting reason. So we are talking about A Hard Day's Night, both the movie and the album / soundtrack, because there is an album which was released as an official Beatles album, but there's also a soundtrack. Because United Artists was essentially doing some of the American side of some of the Beatles stuff, because the Beatles' U.S. contract with Capitol their contract didn't include a provision covering movie scores. So United Artists was like, well, the Beatles, I mean, this is, early in the days of Beatlemania. I mean, this was released in 1964. So, this is primo Beatlemania time frame. But because their contract did not have a provision for movie scores, United Artists is like, you know what? We'll bankroll this movie, and we don't really care if it actually does decent or not, because we know that we can release a soundtrack album, and because it's the Beatles, it'll sell like hotcakes. Which, as far as business acumen goes, it's not a bad decision. You know, if I was in the boardroom, I'd be like, yeah, that tracks. You're probably right.
Yep.
So, United Artists released the soundtrack in the United States, which has 8 Beatles songs that come from the movie, plus 4 tracks from the score that were arranged by George Martin. Or as they called them, easy listening orchestral versions of Beatles tunes. Arranged by George Martin. The funny thing is because George Martin got credit for those arrangements, he actually that actually made it eligible for an Academy Award nomination.
Nice.
So George Martin got an Academy Award nomination for music score, best music score. But the Beatles themselves weren't nominated for their music. Meanwhile, in the UK, they released an actual album, A Hard Day's Night. Actually, I think it's released under a couple different names, but it's all 13 songs that come from the film. And then the United Artists, the Capitol released the Beatles album. It's a little weird because we have like different distribution companies depending on whether you're talking US or UK. So it's a little wonky. This is why the Beatles eventually started Apple. So they can keep everything under one roof. But all the Beatles songs on the United Artists album were released on Capitol as well, on either the Something New album or as 45s singles. And then the United Artists album went to number 1. And then a few years later, United Artists decided to exit the record business, sold its catalog to Capitol, therefore giving that album back essentially to Capitol. So, but in a weird twist of fate, which I'm sure did not hurt United Artists' feelings by any bit whatsoever, is the movie ended up costing about $500,000. It made $8 million in its first week.
Wowza.
Yeah. Making it one of the most profitable percentage-wise movies of all time. Because $8 million return on a $500,000 investment is a huge ROI. So, yeah. So the fact that they were like, we might lose money on the movie. No. Quite the opposite. You're going to make a crap ton of money on the movie and the soundtrack. Which I don't know why they thought that the movie wouldn't necessarily do that well. And I don't know if it's because like the movie is kind of like, it's not a documentary.
No.
But it's not a mockumentary either.
Mm-mm.
Something like, The Ruddles or Spinal Tap.
Mm-hmm.
It's the Beatles playing themselves in essentially a slice of life of what it's like to be the Beatles for a few days.
Mm-hmm.
While, like some of the rest of the world is just trying to live their life. People trying to ride the train to go to work and that sort of thing. People working in restaurants, the cops trying, the bobbies doing their job. Meanwhile, anybody who, age, I don't know what, like 20, 21, 22 and under,
Right.
who saw the Beatles or a Beatle out and about, absolutely lost their crap. The movie opens with this iconic shot of the guys literally running from a horde of screaming girls. Looking like they might be running for their life, except they're laughing the entire time because I think they knew that they weren't ever really in danger. But that's a really realistic depiction of what Beatlemania was like in the early 60s. Yes, they would do these concerts and the screaming would be so loud and so constant. And this is one of the big reasons why they stopped touring. It's because they literally could not hear themselves play.
Right.
And it's like if we can't hear ourselves, it's like, Ringo's like, I can't hear myself drumming, and I'm literally sitting here on the drum set with the sticks in my hand, and I cannot hear what I'm doing. That means the fans aren't hearing anything either.
Right.
And what is the point?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's having these throngs of girls just absolutely losing their mind and chasing them all over the place. And obviously in real life the Beatles would not be like jumping over fences and stuff like that. They had security that did obviously a really good job of making sure that the guys never got accosted. Otherwise they would have ended up like Gene Kelly and Singing in the Rain. When Don Lockwood gets surrounded by some of his fans and tear apart his tuxedo. Very much would have likely happened to the Beatles, if probably worse, actually. So the over-the-top comedic bits are added for entertainment purposes and to give it a little bit of plot. The whole Paul's other grandfather, because everyone's entitled to two. They're not wrong. Who, other than the Beatles, everyone else is an actor playing a different part. So that's not Paul's grandfather by any stretch of the imagination. So what's funny is the Wilfred Bramble, who's the actor, played in the UK what they would call a rag and bone man, so kind of a junk dealer, someone that owned and ran a junkyard, for a BBC sitcom called Steptoe and Son. And eventually, because we're Americans and we like to steal everything for the British and Americanize it, because that's the colonial nature that of our fiber of our being. We eventually stole that, brought it to the UK. You might remember it as a show called Sanford and Son. So he's the OG Sanford, except it was Steptoe instead. But if you remember Sanford and Son, that's because they worked in a junkyard, it was not necessarily the cleanest. At least, especially Red Fox's character, he's very, wearing overalls that don't quite fit, and dirty shoes and stuff like that. So the fact that they're constantly saying that Paul's grandfather is clean is a bit of a nod, a wink to that. It's also a bit, depending on how you want to define clean, as a vernacular, as far as like slang.
Right.
Because being clean, obviously the obvious definition is, clean, free from dirt and clutter and stuff like that. Your parents tell you to clean your room, that sort of thing. There's also clean being, is another term for being sober, from the use of illicit materials, drugs, alcohol, that sort of thing. So some people will say they've been sober. Some people will say they've been, they're clean for so long. There is also the clean movement, which I know some people, or the straight edge movement, which I know some people are part of, where they refrain from drugs, alcohol. A lot of them are vegetarians, but they tend to look like somebody you would see in a mosh pit at like Metallica, and they tend to like that types of music. So, but they don't have the stereotypes that would normally go with somebody like that. They don't smoke, they don't drink, they eat healthy foods, as best as possible. They don't curse. They're very straight edge, but they also might be pierced and covered in tattoos. They might have crazy colored hair and wear Doc Martens. So, so the fact that they keep referring to grandfather as clean, while in reality he's a troublemaker.
Oh yeah, he loves to stir the pot and cause trouble. I mean, he almost single-handedly broke up the band.
Yes. Yeah. Which, I mean, not that they could have known at the time, but the fact that it's Ringo that gets picked on, and Ringo is the one that ultimately like takes off and tries to have like, some time to himself away from everybody else. And then years later, when the real riffs start to occur in the band and Ringo is one of the first ones to walk away and try to clear his head, it's a bit too Twilight Zone-ish for my taste, but
a little too on the head. It's like, ooh,
a little bit too on the nose, and that's not I'm not poking fun at Ringo's nose, much like grandfather did. Shows them what all they know, though. Ringo's the one that gets all the most fan mail out of all of them, so oh my. So yeah, the fact that they keep referring to him as clean when he's anything but.
Yeah.
But it's not like he's a dirty old man.
No.
But he's a troublemaker,
Yeah.
So, and then tries to make himself be like, what? I wouldn't do anything. Who, me?
I'm an innocent little guy.
He's a little old man.
Polly can vouch for me.
Yes. Yeah. Well, considering at first Paul's all like, what little old man? Like the one sitting next to you, Paul.
That one right there.
That one right there. Oh yeah, that one.
When supposedly grandfather gets lost, and I mean Paul's just livid. Like anything happens to him, you guys are dead. And then when he kind of finds out later on some of the crap that's been going on, he's like, take that back.
Yeah. But I mean, at the same time, the guys don't have a problem getting into trouble either, especially John.
No. So I would really love how he pulled the disappearing scene from the bathtub.
Yeah.
That I'm still trying to solve after all these years.
Yeah.
Yes, I get that, but still.
Yeah. I'm sure Norm would like the answer to that as well. It is funny though. It's like it says bubbles disappear, and all there is the hat and the toy boats and submarines and stuff. And he's like, John, like Really? You thought John Lennon went down the drain?
Like somebody shot an invisible shrinking machine gun and he's down through the sewers?
Yeah. Yeah. Like, don't worry. Their adventures in a submarine, it doesn't come for years later.
Right.
And
this isn't helpful. We're trying to shrink a ring off of a finger here.
yes. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, the guys are just as capable of getting themselves into trouble without Grandfather. Grandfather's just like adding gasoline to the fire.
Right. Which they need.
Yeah. But, this kind of slice of life of them, seeing what traveling's like, and then, getting to a hotel and then trying to do a press conference, which, again, this is supposedly is, the guy that helped write this script. He hung out with the Beatles for a little bit to get an idea of their personalities, and then wrote, the versions we see in this movie. But all you gotta do is watch any Beatles press conference and know that no, that's not. They're not. This is not like satire or anything. This is very much built in reality. There's just so many good one-liners.
Oh yes.
Or setups and jokes in this that it's just like, and courtesy of all of them. That you can't help but just be like, yeah. I imagine after seeing, if girls and I'm sure some guys too weren't in love with the Beatles enough before this movie really was released, I'm sure after watching it they're like, I would love to hang out with them. They seem like so much fun. We would have so much fun together, laughing and drinking tea and eating sandwiches.
Playing hooky.
Yes, answering fan mail. It's like, but yeah, that's funny. And then they have them constantly going in and out of this TV studio, supposed to get ready to do this performance, which in reality, if you're an act, like a band or something, and you're going to perform on a TV show, usually when you do the rehearsals, you're rehearsing what you're actually going to perform.
Right. You aren't just
just random stuff.
Right.
with different sets and not standing in the same places so they can check the lighting and stuff like that.
and like, hey, I got a new song idea. Let's
Yeah. I mean, for sound check, some artists, the year that Chauncey and I went and saw Paul in Detroit, we got there early enough that Paul was doing sound check, and because it was an outside venue, those of us outside
could hear it. Yeah,
could hear it and even kind of see it, depending on where you were standing. And Paul would pull out some unique songs that weren't part of the set list, but he's also been at this for more than 60 years, so I think he knows what he's doing. And it's also his gig. It's his gig. He can do whatever the hell he wants. But when you're doing something for television where it's somebody else's, network and studio and all that,
you can't really do that.
This is not how this works when preparing for a live TV performance. When they did Ed Sullivan, they did not do any of that. But that's okay. That's not nearly as entertaining as what this is. And you also get a whole bunch of new songs either. Because, I mean, the Beatles knew they were making this movie, and so they wrote a bunch of material to be used in the film. They didn't have the title track, though, until they actually came up with the title for the film. Because it was just going to be called like the Beatles or Beatlemania or something like that, and nobody was really liking it, and they were like, well, we got to come up with something. And the phrase "a hard day's night" comes from Ringo. Ringo has a habit of saying things that at first hearing you're like, well, that doesn't make any sense, but then when you think about it, you're like, oh no, that actually is kind of a good turn of phrase. So yeah, "A Hard Day's Night" is one of Ringo's. I believe "8 Days a Week" is also one of Ringo's. So either that or they got it from somebody else they knew, like somebody's uncle or something. But yeah, apparently they, after a string of gigs, they got back to like their hotel or whatever, and they were crashing, and Ringo said something like, "It's been a hard day's night" or something like that, and they were like, "That's it." And then the guys ran off to see who could write the best song using that phrase, and that's how we ended up with the title track. So yeah, I mean, really, the plot is just a loose device to get the Beatles from point A to point B to point C to point D, while giving them opportunities to sometimes sing and then sometimes dance to their own music, because that's what you do when you crash a party, is you dance to your own music. And then all of a sudden the same TV show has instrumental versions of some of your songs for women in like showgirl big plumey costumes to dance. The whole thing, the plot is just ridiculous, is really what it is. It's just an opportunity to showcase a whole bunch of new Beatles music, have the Beatles up on the screen so that all the fans will go, ah, well, in the movie theater. I'm sure, I imagine that back in '64, when this was released in the movie theaters, that the movie theaters probably sounded very similar to what the movie theater sounded like when they released the Eras tour in theaters for a hot minute. Yep. So I imagine that's probably similar.
Yep.
But it gives us an opportunity to see the Beatles and see more of their personality. Yes, there was a script, but they also ad-libbed a lot, especially John.
Oh yeah.
I don't know how many of those tape measures he cut, doing different versions of the "I now declare this bridge open." And that was their actual tailor. That was the guy that made the Beatles clothes. So I guess it was worth having to go through a few measuring tapes to have a cameo. So
John, how not gonna cut it the same? Oh yeah, I promise. Snip.
Yeah. There is we get a kind of a meet cute, an unintentional meet cute with this movie, because when the guys are on the train, and there are two girls sitting at a table, and Paul goes over and he's like, kind of flirting with them, and then those girls, along with some other girls, end up standing outside of the little caged area where the guys, where first Paul put grandfather, because he's being a pain in the arse, making the girls think that they were prisoners and not the Beatles. Wild. They end up playing cards and singing singing a song. There's one of the girls, she's blonde, is standing as you're looking at them to the left of Paul, would be our looking at left. That is Patty Boyd.
I was wondering, just like, is it?
Yes, 18 months after filming this, she would be Mrs. George Harrison. Until she eventually moves on to become Mrs. Eric Clapton. So, yeah, there's a little bit of an accident, unintentional meet cute in this film, because this is where George and Patty met. Was on the set of this movie. So I think that's really cute. And then supposedly at the end of the movie, when they're finally doing their actual performance for the TV station live, in that crowd of screaming Beatles fans, which I'm sure is like 95% female, there are some boys in there, and supposedly mixed in with those boys is a very young Phil Collins, as in drummer Phil Collins of Genesis and solo career fame.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. There are, obviously we've got the songs. Almost all of them are Lennon and McCartney penned, other than "Don't Bother Me," which is a George Harrison song. So we've got "A Hard Day's Night," "I Should Have Known Better," "I Want to Be Your Man," which is one of the ones they're dancing to. "Don't Bother Me," again, also one that they dance to at the little party. "All My Loving," "If I Fell," "Can't Buy Me Love," "And I Love Her," "I'm Happy Just to Dance with You," the instrumental of "This Boy," which is also a Ringo's theme, an instrumental of "A Hard Day's Night," a reprise of "Can't Buy Me Love," "Tell Me Why," a reprise of "If I Fell," reprise of "I Should Have Known Better," "That She Loves You," obviously, kind of recreating their Ed Sullivan appearance. Is really kind of what they're doing, except they're not in the United States. And then, there are a few songs that were considered or ultimately got cut. So if you know your Beatles catalog, "I'll Cry Instead" was considered, but ultimately not used. It was supposed to be used during the police chase sequence, but they eventually decided that "Can't Buy Me Love," since it's more upbeat, was more appropriate. So it was recorded, and it was recorded in two sections that were going to be featured in two parts, with the break being when the Beatles returned to the police station to stop and catch their breath. There is a full-length version, which has a repeat of the first verse that was mixed as a rough mono mix and sent to United Artists and Capitol Records in North America. It got lost because it never got mastered. Because it was just a rough cut. So all the mixes, both mono and stereo, you hear do not have the repeat of that first verse. The song "You Can't Do That" was filmed as part of the TV concert sequence, but was not included in the final cut of the film. So they ended up sending that footage, though, to be aired on the Ed Sullivan Show as a teaser to help promote the film. Once again, Ed Sullivan doing the Beatles right. And then that aired on the Sullivan Show in conjunction with the interview with the Beatles, specifically filmed by Ed Sullivan in London. And it is in the there's a documentary, The Making of a Hard Day's Night. And then the song "I Call Your Name" was cut, but people do not know why. So.
Oh, I'm kind of running through it in my head,
Mm-hmm.
and I know if it fits like the mood with some of the other songs from the Hard Day's Night,
Mm-hmm.
that the tie-in, maybe that's why they cut it. I don't know. I mean, I could see it fitting, but then again, probably smart idea.
Yeah. Possibly. Another bit of trivia. When the guys run out of the TV studio out into the field and are just running around, being all wacky. Just rolling all over the grass and jumping and doing all crazy things. John was actually not there.
Really?
John had written a book, an autobiography, and was out promoting it. So they used a body double for when they're far away, and then they shot close-ups for John and just cut those in.
Wow.
So John actually does not appear as much as you think he does in the film. So that was, I find it interesting that John had already written an autobiography by 1964. Like, dude, you're just getting started. You're going to be writing a few of these, I think. So, when George gets pulled, now this is very funny. Having this scene where George gets pulled, thinking that like he's gonna, like, these people think they're gonna use him in an advertisement for clothing for teens. And the way they're talking and the way they're talking about the girl who is like their spokesperson is very much, because they're like, you're going to tell people what you think of these shirts, but not what you really think. We're going to tell you what to say, and then she's going to repeat it so that eventually all the kids will have FOMO, essentially, and want to buy these shirts. And I'm like, that is just what influencing is like now. Just
nothing changed.
Digital. Yes. It's like, nothing has changed here. Like, the girl that they're talking about, she's just an influencer. Except she's on TV and like magazines and stuff, because the internet wasn't a thing yet. So like, and people doing advertisements for things that they may or may not necessarily actually like because they're making money off of it. Like, oh good Lord, this is just influencing like 60 years too early. But
I was saying, the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Yeah, really. Yeah. But the word grotty that George uses, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, which, they're the hoity-toity at the very top when it comes to language, is the George using that term in this movie is the first recorded use of the word. Supposedly, the screenwriter, Alan Owen, he claimed it was a word used in Liverpool to mean grotesque. The guys at the Beatles said they never heard it before and thought that Owen made it up. And eventually it caught on, and the Beatles have been credited with the early usage of it. So as far as the Oxford English Dictionary is concerned, the Beatles are the first people to ever use the term grotty.
Cool.
So not only are the Beatles like one of the greatest bands of all time, they also have affected the English language and introduced a new word. So mocker was not new, though. Ringo had used that term before in other interviews.
So. The cross between a mod and a rocker.
Yeah. No, I'm a mocker.
Yes,
so many good lines in that.
We're doing very well not quoting the whole entire movie, I must say.
I was like, what do you call that haircut, Arthur? You speak to your father often? No, we're just good friends. They're gonna get me going. No, it's okay. Yeah. And actually, Ringo's line, "I'm a mocker," was voted 58 in the 100 greatest movie lines by Premiere in 2007. Let's see. There's all sorts of trivia based around this. Those are actual fans at the train station. Those are not extras. Although I imagine with the right extras, they would not need to act, really. Let's see here. Of course, it's set in England, so we got a lot of, especially when Ringo goes for his jaunt, we see some London. So, they did some interesting things camera-wise. There's a 360 pan around Paul when he's singing "I Love Her." They did that by attaching the camera to strings.
Wow.
And essentially manipulating it like a marionette. There was a rumor that 15 minutes cut from the film, including scenes involving a London double-decker bus, because what can be more London than that? The Beatles did ride a double-decker bus. It did happen. Just got cut. They actually autographed the ceiling of the bus, which at the time was privately owned. And it actually ended up getting put in storage somewhere and started to deteriorate. And it eventually got bought by a guy in the late 80s and has restored it to the way it would have looked in the movie, but unfortunately the Beatles signatures had long disappeared, which is a shame. So, funny enough, the word Beatles never mentioned in the movie. When they began shooting, the Beatles had not joined the Actors Union yet. So Wilfred Bramble actually inducted them into the union, into Equity, which is the British Actors Union. Like, that's good. I mean, just because they're Beatles doesn't mean that they don't deserve union protection as actors. If you know your other British hallmarks, the grumpy old man on the train who's like, "I ride this train twice a week." That guy, he's in Goldfinger.
Okay,
as Colonel Smithers.
Okay.
And funnily enough, in Goldfinger, James Bond makes a quip about serving champagne at the wrong temperature is like listening to the Beatles without earmuffs. And United Artists, studio that released the James Bond movies. Le Cirque, the gambling club, same club where James Bond makes his first appearance in Dr. No. Again, released by United Artists. Yeah. When the film appeared in theaters, the screaming of the teens in the audience during the musical sections was just as deafening as in live performances, I'm sure. The concert sequence at the end was filmed entirely in one day with multiple cameras. At one point, the sheer stress of filming caused one of the camera crew to realize he had cracked one of his teeth.
Oh, wow.
And because of that, one of the other cameramen turned down working on Help.
Not unless I get hazard pay.
Yeah, really. Especially dental, apparently. Uh, for American audiences, obviously, their diehard fans would not have cared. But, and I think we've talked about this, or maybe I think we talked about it on Gold Standard. I've brought up this fact before, that the Beatles smoking was considered scandalous to some adults when the movie was released in America. Because how dare they smoke and have long hair? In the UK, they're from working class Liverpool. Everybody smoked. You're essentially born with a cigarette in your hand if you're born in Liverpool.
If you don't,
yeah,
pretty.
Yeah, but their longer hair and the smoking, they were considered radicals by some Americans, obviously. So we've talked about the controversy when we talked about John. Lester, the director, hadn't considered that Americans might take offense. And actually Elvis smoked, but he could not. They made sure to never show him smoking because it would have been practically criminal to show Elvis smoking. So, I don't even think about it, So, of course, I'm also sitting here wearing my Abbey Road T-shirt, where Paul has a cigarette in his hand, so and no shoes.
Yeah.
So I don't think twice about it. So
yeah.
Richard Lester's fee was, he got paid £6,000 with no percentage of the profits. Okay, because I think United thought that it was gonna be a flop. The producer did award him 1% of the profits after it became a huge hit. But that was after the film's first release. So any money he made was from video, DVD, TV residuals and reissues. So, which I think he probably still walked away with a decent amount of money.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, it's just I mean, the whole thing is just it's not anything to be taken seriously by any means. This was a cash grab, really, for United Artists, and something that the Beatles just thought would be fun. And it ended up just working out really well for all of us, and I think ultimately, again, us as fans have been all better for it, because then that gave them, the gumption, or whatever you want to call it, to end up doing Help, which does have more of a plot. If you consider Ringo almost getting sacrificed for putting on the wrong ring, a plot, we'll do Help eventually. And then what we would consider now essentially music videos, but back then they were promo videos for certain songs. The Beatles did, so because they weren't touring anymore, but they wanted to make sure that their faces were still getting out there. They weren't just dropping albums and being like, well, I hope the fans notice. So they were creating like these promo videos, which I think you could say they qualify as music videos now, for things like albums off like the Magical Mystery Tour and later albums like that, Strawberry Fields and stuff like that. I'm sure also added, this jump into them acting as a group, that all four of the guys have done a lot of acting on their own, outside of being a Beatle. I think John, was one of the first ones to be in a film, a major film, early on in the Beatles' career. But and then for them to go on and do the acting and the music videos that they did, throughout the rest of their solo careers and the like. So obviously I can't wait till we do Yellow Submarine. Yellow Submarine's the outlier because that is not the Beatles.
Nope.
Although it sounds very much like the Beatles, obviously the singing is the Beatles. All the music is the Beatles, but all the talking is not the Beatles. Although they do make a cameo at the very end of the movie, but Yellow Submarine is not the Beatles, the guys performing their animated counterparts. This and I think the idea of doing kind of a musical comedy film that has just a very loose plot, for better, for worse. If you've seen Give My Regards to Broad Street, Paul years later is like, yeah, I'm going to do that again. Hey, Ringo, what are you doing?
I'm in need of a drummer. You interested?
Yeah. Come over, Linda and I want to talk to you about something. Like, you remember that movie we did, A Hard Day's Night, where we sang a lot of songs and it had a very loose plot? How would you feel like doing that again? Except this time a guy gets locked in a room at a train station. Did I mention there'll be ballroom dancing?
Yeah. You beat me to it. Now, Ringo, get this. There's going to be ballroom dancing.
Yeah.
Instead of Freddie breaking it to Queen, like, and here's where the opera section comes in for Bohemian Rhapsody.
Exactly. Oh, goodness. Oh, bye. We only have, comparatively with Queen, we still got a lot of albums to cover because they were pretty prolific.
Yes.
As we have attested to, sometimes multiple albums in one calendar year. Beatles, obviously, not so much. At least as a group. They're individuals. We've done all four guys solo. We've covered them individually and discussed their solo careers. But thankfully, we do have a couple of movies that we can also cover, and also maybe some of their solo stuff. Yeah,
I'd be down for it.
Give My Regards to Broad Street. Why not? At some point. Yes. But yeah, it's a very interesting thing, but I'm not hating it. I love that some of the artists that have really made their mark in history are the ones that weren't afraid to push the envelope, think outside the box, all those cliches, go outside their comfort zone, try something new, try something a little different, try something a little zany maybe that might make their fans go, wait a minute. But then when they see the result, they're like, oh yeah, absolutely. I knew you had it all. I didn't know you had it in you the entire time. Good job, good show. So, and obviously the it's been referenced and parodied and like a lot of things throughout the years. But it's iconic. It's the Beatles' first film, and it was I can't say it was a gamble on United Artists' side because they were expecting the movie not to necessarily do well. So if you know going, if you have that mindset going into it, it's not really a gamble. So really, it's just like they kept the bar low, and therefore, you keep your expectations low. So anything that goes higher than that is just a bonus, I guess.
Yeah.
But nowadays, I don't know how many studios would do that same thing, and have it pay off in the same way. So unlike some other movies that we talked about, which did not do well, and then eventually became cult classics and made like a crap ton of money once like VHS and DVD and rentals became a thing.
Right.
So yeah, it's an interesting bit of like his entertainment industry trivia, I think, where they're like, if we make money, great. If we don't, we're gonna make a crap ton of money on the album, which they did. They just also happen to make a crap ton of money on the movie too. So, but any other thoughts, Holly? I feel like I've been doing most of the talking.
No, everything, basically what you said, I was gonna say. So I mean, if you haven't seen it, watch it. It's amazing.
Yep. I own it. I actually don't have the soundtrack that's got the instrumentals. I just have the UK album.
Okay.
That was released where it's just the songs. I probably should add the soundtrack to my collection. Why don't I?
I think I know we've got 2 CD editions, and I think we might have both. It's hard to remember because when they did the releases with those, the cardboard foldouts that looked like the actual LP albums, we invested in some of those. So it's like, oh boy, those are safely tucked away, and I kind of stick to the streaming audio.
Yeah.
And then every now and again break out the physical.
Yep. There is a novelization.
There is? Ooh, did not know that.
Yes. Is described as based on the original screenplay by Alan Owen. It was released in 1964, priced at 2 shillings and 6 pence.
Not bad.
Which is essentially half a crown. Which I don't know what that's the equivalent of now. I'm sure that finding a copy of it is probably not easy. Because I can't imagine that's something that's had reprints. So you're looking for a 60-year-old book.
Just for giggles, I did a search on Amazon. I've come up with nothing unless I'm doing it wrong. So
yeah. Let's see. Any more interesting tidbits? Apparently watching this movie on BBC television in 1970 is what inspired John to write the song I'm the Greatest, which Ringo would eventually record in 1973. Let's see. Let's look real quick at physical releases. Home video license, 1984. First release on VHS, Betamax, and video disc and laserdisc. It was also released as part of the Criterion Collection, as was a single disc CLV and a 2-disc CAV laserdisc. Apparently there were pitch problems with that version. Apparently there was a CD-ROM produced in 1993, with video in QuickTime 1, kids. How many of you remember using QuickTime to watch video on your computer? Containing most of the stuff that's on the Criterion version, including the original script. First DVD release, it was in 1997. Contains the 1982 prologue and trailer, newsreels, an interview with Richard Lester, and the running, jumping, standing still film. Miramax reissues it in theaters, and then as a collector's edition DVD 2 years later, so that's 2000 and then 2002, as well as a final issue in VHS format. So if you manage to get on VHS, hold on to that, because they don't do that anymore. The film had been transferred from a restored 35mm negative. Now I'm trying to think of what version of the DVD I have. I don't know.
I got floating around.
Yeah. There's the Miramax version has a bonus disc with over 7 hours of additional material. 2009 released on Blu-ray in Canada. However, that is region free.
Yes.
And contains most of the 2000 DVD bonus features. 2010 Miramax was sold by Disney. The video sub-license transferred to Lionsgate, although no U.S. Blu-ray release date had been announced by 2010. Blu-ray released in Mexico in 2011 that has Spanish subtitles, which I believe is the version I was watching on YouTube, because it's in English, but it's got Spanish subtitles. Janus Films acquires the rights to the film from Miramax in 2014, announced a domestic video re-release via the Criterion Collection. Dual format edition. So that would include the first ever US issue on Blu-ray. It was also re-released in theaters, because 2014 would have been 10 years ago, so it would have been the 50th anniversary of it. Yeah, there was a remastered version in HD shown on BBC 4 in the UK to mark the 50th anniversary. Criterion re-released the Blu-ray as part of the Rock Box, a collection of rock music related films. Includes Monterey Pop, Gimme Shelter, and Quadrophenia.
Interesting.
Yes. And just 2 years ago, Criterion announced its first ever 4K Ultra HD release. A 6-film slate that would include A Hard Day's Night. So, and that was released 18th of January 2022. And at the 40th anniversary, there was a cast and crew reunion screening with Paul and Victor Spinetti and John Junkin and David Jansen. Paul said that while he's seen it on video quite a bit, that was the first time he'd seen it on a big screen since the premiere in 1964. So that's cool.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm. Not bad for a little movie the studio thought they were gonna not make any money on.
Yeah, exactly.
So, all right. Well, if any of our listeners have seen A Hard Day's Night and want to give their 2 cents either about the movie or just the music, the album, that's fine too. You can send us a feedback. Our email address is fiveishfangirls@gmail.com, or you can go to our website, which is thefiveishfangirls.com, where you can find links to all of our various social media accounts, the podcast-related ones, plus our individual ones, which I highly recommend following at least the podcast-related ones, because, as I mentioned earlier, I will be at PopCon Louisville this weekend, so I will be posting, if and when I can, if I remember correctly, at the Kentucky Convention Center. Granted, I've not been there since 2019. Cell phone signal's not terrible, if I remember correctly. So, cross my fingers, cross my toes that that's still the case all these years later.
Vibes.
Yeah.
Good
Yes.
Wi-Fi.
Yeah. Or at the very least, good cell phone signal vibes. So, I just don't want a repeat of GalaxyCon Columbus last year on Saturday where I just no signal whatsoever. So it was like being in a giant concrete Faraday cage. Not that concrete would work for Faraday cage, but y'all get my meaning. If you don't, sorry, I'm a science nerd. So yeah, follow the social medias. For a while, I am at PopCon, and I will have a recap of said PopCon next week when we return. Of course, in the meantime, you can also find links to the book club. So if you want to join in either this month or previous month's discussions of a Doctor Who book or Big Finish audio, those can be found on Goodreads, link on our website. If you wish to give us some of your hard-earned money, don't feel like you have to, but if you want to, you do have options. You become a regular supporter on Patreon. That's easy enough, as little as $1 a month. Helps us a ton. Libsyn is not free, but they've been a great platform to be on, so yeah, we'll continue paying them. No complaints, really. I think we've had like 2 hiccups in the 9.5 years that we've officially had a proper RSS feed. So that helps with that. You could do a single time monetary givings either through Ko-Fi. If you wanted to just go to the podcast in general, if you want to give specifically to the nonprofit, we also have a link to PayPal. That's also on the website. If you want a little something more in return, like merch, you can go to Redbubble and purchase some merch. And we have both. We have Fiveish Fangirls, Gold Standard, and just some random nerdy designs on there. We got some Doctor Who, we got some D&D. So, just saying, you got options. Maybe one of these days I'll have the time and the brain power to create some more. I have ideas. I was gonna find the time. But that is there as well. So, all right. Well, thank you all for listening to Holly and I's ramblings about the greatest band that ever existed. Sorry, Queen. I love you, but the Fab Four came first. So it's like, you never forget your first Doctor. You never forget your first rock band.
Exactly.
So, in this case, it's the Beatles. So, I still really love Queen though. Just a different vibe. That's all. Just a slightly different vibe. It's not a Coke Pepsi thing. It's more like Coke and like Dr. Pepper. Similar idea, but just different enough you could like both and not have to fight over them. So, where was I? Anyway, yes, ramblings. That's what we do best. Tangents and squee. So, I'm tired. So we're going to go because I need to rest up for PopCon. So with that, we are going to sign off for this week.
This is Sally from Wisconsin saying good evening.
And this is Rachel in Indianapolis, Indiana. Quit being taller than me. Thank you, our Fiveish fam, for joining us on this week's geeky journey. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. Stay connected with us on our website, thefiveishfangirls.com, and follow us on most social media with @FiveishFangirls. Plus, check out our nonprofit, Fangirls Give Back, to see how we're making a positive impact in our community. Until next time, stay nerdy and let the squee continue.